All right, we are trying this one more time. I'm trying to do a stream today where we're syncing up the Digitakt with miRack on iPad. We just did a stream for about 45 minutes and I was not able to get it functioning as expected. But I'm really not a quitter and I don't want to be a quitter, and I'm going to try to give this a second try. So what we've got here is I've got my example patch working, and I can start and stop miRack in time with the Digitakt. We have the drums and some like hi-hat or whatever coming from the Digitakt, and the snare drum is coming out of miRack at this time. And when I press play on the Digitakt, we get miRack starting and stopping in sync with the Digitakt. We can hear and see that it is working. And what I'm going to attempt to do is I'm going to attempt to recreate this one more time today. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start with a brand new project inside of miRack. We're going to go new from template. We're going to open the most basic project that we can. We're going to go over here on the Electron Digitakt, and we are going to start a brand new project. We're going to go create new. Okay. Whew, we're trying this again. All right, what we're going to do is we are going to go to the MIDI settings inside of the Digitakt. We're going to go to the little gear icon. We're going to scroll down to the system, and we're going to check our USB configuration. We need to make sure that this is set to audio and MIDI because we're using the Digitakt as the audio interface for the iPad. Now we're going to go ahead and get out of this menu here, and we'll need to make sure that miRack is set up to talk to the Digitakt. We're going to go ahead and go to its settings page, and over here, in the settings, we can go to MIDI devices, and we can see that Electron Digitakt is in fact checked. Okay, let's see. The one thing that I've done differently here is I have removed the launch control Excel from the equation. And what that means is that we're currently connected via a USB cable. In fact, let's just get this out of the shot, shall we? Because this is not being used. And that's important. I think that may have had something to do with the situation. Is I've got just a standard USB cable here coming out of the back of the Digitakt, and that is being routed into the iPad using the Apple brand dongle adapter. Thanks, Wall. And so I want to stress that again. I've removed the powered USB hub from the equation here. And so that means that we're not going to be able to have MIDI control over miRack here, but hopefully the session will be able to, go forward today. Okay, we're going to go ahead and insert all of the things that we need inside of miRack one more time. And let's see here. We're going to just press the plus here at the... Are you kidding? Is my Apple Pencil not... There we go. So it'd be responsive there. Whoops. Okay, fantastic. Now we're back in. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and load up the modules that we need to get started with today. We're going to go tags, we're going to go to mixer, and we're going to grab this mix 8 from Bog Audio. We're going to grab another one of those, and we're going to grab the mix 4 from Bog Audio. We're going to press the plus again, and we're going to go packs and Bog Audio so that I can grab their limiter and also their VU meter. Let's see, the limiter is right here. And the Bog Audio VU meter. I always have trouble finding this in their page, so I just go to tags and visual, and here it is, the VU meter. Okay, for those of you who might have tuned in already and watched the crash and burn, this is going to be a little bit tedious, so I'm going to try to go a little bit quickly here, and I'm just going to connect up the mixer here to our limiter, to the VU meter, and to the output. I'm going to take the left and right of this mixer, and I'm going to plug it into the inputs of, so I've got both of our mixers talking to our consolidation mixer that consolidates both those two together. Now we're just going to need the clocked module. So if I go to tags and I go to clock and I grab the clocked module, okay, now we just need the MIDI module. So if we go from tags and we scroll down to MIDI, now we get the MIDI trigger input module. and I'm going to bring this over here and our clocked module over here. We're going to actually go into the mode that lets me just move things super easily. Bring this up here to the left, bring all these over. Okay, fantastic. And then the VU meter, whoops, and then the VU meter. All right. All right, so we're trying this again. Okay, we want to make sure that in the wrench section, okay, in our MIDI devices, that the Electron Digitakt is checked, and it is. So we're receiving information from the Digitakt. Now up here in the MIDI trigger input, we need to make sure that the Digitakt is selected there as well. So we'll select that, Electron Digitakt. We could set what MIDI channel we want to work with, but we're just going to leave it to Omni mode right now. Yeah, I'm trying again, Sean. I don't want to be like, a super quitter. And so what I did is I hard rebooted the iPad, I hard rebooted the Digitakt, and I removed the MIDI controller from the equation, which was connected up via a powered USB hub. So that USB hub is gone. We are just doing this the simplest way possible now with just a USB cable only, and no powered USB hub and no MIDI controller. Okay, so we've told miRack that we want it to receive the trigger inputs from the Digitakt on all channels, but we need to remember that the octave settings are off on these boxes. So when it says C2, it actually means C3 from the Digitakt, etc. So as long as we keep that in mind, we should be fine here. Now we need a clock signal, so I'm going to use the Digitakt has 8 tracks at the top for its inbuilt samples, and it has 8 tracks at the bottom for MIDI. Now I'm going to use one of these MIDI tracks over here. I'm going to use, in fact, the ending 2 MIDI tracks, one for our clock and one for our reset signal. So I want to just send an 1/8 note clock. At this time, I'm going to make the pattern 4 bars long, and I'm going to send that trigger signal through all 4 patterns. This is going to be our clock signal. This is just 1/8 notes. Now I'm going to take I'm going to actually turn the channel on, put it on channel 1, and we're going to turn its trigger to C3, so that when it triggers these notes, it's going to trigger those notes on C3. Just make sure that it knows, actually. Okay, fantastic. And then I'm going to take the output from, that patch point here, which is, these 1/8 notes, and we're going to route that into the BPM, and that's our clock signal. Now, if I go to MIDI channel 15, and I put in a trigger, and I put in a trigger signal on page 1, and I tell that trigger signal to only trigger once every 4 times through the pattern, it's going to make this trigger basically trigger once every 16 bars. And we just need to turn this channel on to channel 1, and we just need to set the note to C#3, again, because we have an octave difference here. The module says that it wants a C#2, but it's actually a C#3 for some reason. Okay, and we're going to run that into our run signal and also our reset signal. And if I'm not mistaken, that is going to get us where we want to go. And we're getting closer. The only thing we need to do is that on our actual MIDI signal here that we're using for, I screwed that up and didn't get some of those dots in. Let's make sure we've got all pages of 1/8 notes. Fantastic. We just need to tell the clock now that it's expecting 1/8 notes for the clock. So if we go into the mode section here, our first click changes it to CV, and then our second click changes it to P2, and we can scroll all the way up through P24. Okay, and we want P2, which is 2 pulses per quarter note. Okay, so we've got a quarter note here, and we've got 2 pulses. This is going to allow miRack to know what our tempo is. So when I press play, it's going to line up with the tempo in the Digitakt. Now, if I change the tempo in the Digitakt, it can go up to, say, 140 or whatever, the tempo is going to follow along inside of miRack. Okay, now you guys can see that this is all connected up and working so far. The only thing that we've done differently, hey, what's happening? Tavarsi, thanks for tuning back in. The only thing that I've done differently now is I've removed that powered USB hub from between the Digitakt and the iPad. So what ultimately, what that means for us is that we no longer have a MIDI controller that we can assign to all these, changes and variations inside of miRack. I'm not sure if that's, an actual limitation, or if that's just something that I was doing, incorrectly today, the way I had it routed or whatnot. But without that USB hub and with this direct USB connection only, everything seems to be working again, and we're going to try to move forward again a little bit here today. What let's do is let's go ahead and go back to what we started with, which was we were going to work at like 135 maybe. I'll start at maybe 134 here, and then I had loaded a kick drum sample onto the first pad here, so let's go ahead and do that. This is a sample from my hardware Eurorack system that I'm loading here. This is a drum sample from the Noise Engineering BIA. And let's see here, it's in this folder here. Whoops. We can scroll down and grab Dean's favorite BIA kick. If I just hit yes, it puts a little check mark by that sample. I can scroll over to the right-hand side and we can choose load to project. We can load that one sample and we can tell it to assign that sample to the first pad by going to the source page and just scrolling through the samples that we have loaded in our session until we get that big old kick drum, right? And we can bring the volume up on that. Now I can maybe check my levels. Make sure I'm not being too loud. And I'm going to put this kick drum in as just a 4 on the floor kick drum, right? All right. Let me know if we start to get too loud, as things, are going to get a little bit louder, like if I'm distorting anyone's phone or monitor speakers. Please let me know. All right, so we've got the kick drum happening over here coming out of the Digitakt. Let's go ahead and get some things sequenced in from miRack, shall we? If we double tap on the screen, we can go to tags and we can choose a sequencer module, right? We can grab this 3x16 sequencer that I like to use a lot. And we can patch the reset into the reset of the clocked module. And we can patch our clock into the clock input of the sequencer. Now we need our clock to be at a ×4, which is 4 pulses per quarter note, as we're sending out to the other devices in miRack. And that gets them at the same tempo that we're working with. And you can see here now that everything is actually working as expected. If I zoom in a little bit, when I press play, the play head starts going here inside of miRack. And when I press stop on the Digitakt, we stop inside of miRack, okay? So, so far, so good. I think it was just something to do with having that USB hub plugged in for some reason. Maybe it was what was giving us the problems. So what we're going to do is go back to what we were trying to do originally and bring some hi-hats in over here on this side. So if we go to, let's see, tags, and we go to drum, we can bring in the closed hats, and if we do that again, plus we can bring in the open hats. We can bring these over here next to the sequencer. And let's sequence these open hats with the second lane of our sequencer and the first lane of our sequencer we can assign to the closed hats. Just put in some open hats on the offbeat here and route that into our mixer. Open hats, cool, bring that down in case it's too loud to start off with. And the big moment, for those of you who sat and watched the crash and burn, this is the redemption moment right here. I'm going to press play on the Digitakt, and we're now completely in sync. And when I press stop, it stops on miRack. Okay, so this is what I meant by I had it tested for days and it was working fine. I think it was just something creating an anomaly when I had that MIDI controller plugged in through the powered USB hub, because we are back in, guys, and ready to rock. So there's those hats. Bring those down in the mix a little bit, and we're actually riding now. We can just start going for it, right? Let's bring in maybe some closed hats around those open hats, shall we? And route this into the mixer maybe here. I think I'm going to go with the HR16 for the closed hat, and And maybe that 909 for the open hat. Just kind of a really classic sound to start us off with today. We are in, everyone. All right, let me check in with the chat real fast and thank everybody for tuning back in. Thanks for tuning back in, Sean. Thanks for tuning back in, Travarsi. Hey, HR Terror. Thanks for tuning back in. All right, Andy. Thanks for tuning back in. Thanks, Slim, for showing up. All right. Hey, Void 101. What's happening, Luke? Hey, we got Side Tortoise Ferryman in the chat. All right, I appreciate that. What's happening, HR Terror? Did I say that already? All right. Andy, we got Andy back. We got Mike. All right, you guys. Thanks for your patience, everyone, as we try this again. I just want to stress one more time what the fix here was. I had the Novation Novation Launch Control XL MIDI controller plugged in via a powered USB hub, and removing the powered USB hub from the equation and getting a hard reset on the Digitakt and a hard reset on the iPad seemed to get us back going again. Obviously, it's it's not as optimal as if we had the MIDI controller that we could still assign, but we are synced up back, so that's really what the important thing is today. All right, so we are back in. Thanks, Andy, I appreciate that. All right, okay, let's go ahead and try to create some sort of a bass line, shall we? And let's use miRack for this. Let's go ahead and bring in, let's see, I was going to use that same sequencer so that we could start getting creative with the pattern changes and whatnot. But since we're no longer doing that with the MIDI controller, sort of all bets are off, I think, at this point with what to use for a sequencer. Let's go ahead and grab this one here. It's a really simple sequencer. And we're going to use this to create ourselves a little bit of a bass line. Let's go, actually, I'm going to double click on the screen here where I want to load the module. And we're going to go to packs, and let's go to audible instruments, and maybe try to get a nice bass line out of this macro oscillator 2, which is the virtual recreation of the mutable instruments braids module. Okay, let's see here. I think I'm going to also need some other things. We're going to need, let's see, a quantizer. So if I go to tags and go to quantizer, we can grab this really simple quantizer here from JW Modules. This is going to keep us locked to a scale. And maybe we'll just set this to the scale of F pentatonic. Cool. And let's go ahead also and load an attenuverter. I like to use the one from Befaco. So if we go packs and Befaco, we can grab this dual attenuverter here from Befaco. Now what this does is I'm going to generate some control voltages here through this 8-step sequencer, and these are going to relate to pitch information. And basically what we're sending out from the jump is a really wide variety of pitch information, like from C1 all the way up to C8. But that's not really super musical. And if we want to keep that a little bit more restrained and maybe like a more 1 or 2 octave amount, we can use an attenuverter to do that. We're going to plug the output of our sequencer into the input of this attenuverter, and we're going to plug the output of the attenuverter into the volt per octave input of the quantizer. And let's see, we're also going to want, I think we're going to want, yeah, an envelope for this. We're not going to worry about trying to use the built-in envelope on that module today. So we're going to do this the super easy way. We're going to go to tags and grab an envelope generator. There's a really simple one here from Bog Audio. We'll grab that and drag this over. And now I just need a VCA, which is an amplifier, to route that sound through. And we're going to go VCA here from Bog Audio. Fantastic. Okay. Now, let's see here. I think I'd like to maybe create like a 6-note bass line today or something. Let's see about that. How many steps do we want to use? Let's say 6 steps. And let's clock and reset our sequencer here by sending the clock into our clock signal and the reset into our reset signal. Now this sequencer is going to know when the downbeat is. So when I press play on the Digitakt, it's going to start going in time with our project. So what we need to do here is we just need to route the out of our module into the, let's see here, the VCA, into the input of our VCA. We need to route the envelope that we're going to create with our envelope generator into the CV input of our VCA, because that's going to open up this amplifier in accordance with the shape of the envelope that we create for our sound. We want to make sure that our envelope generator is set to re-trigger, and it is by default there. It just needs a trigger signal now, so it knows when to open up the envelope. And I think we can do that really simply by just grabbing the trigger signal from the third sequencer lane above us here and routing that into the trigger input. I just want 16th notes, so I'm just going to highlight all of these 16th notes here so that it's going to send out a 16th note trigger to our envelope and open up on every 16th note. And I think we can start getting this routed into the mix at this time. Absolutely cool. All right. Here's what I want to do. I want to make it so we can hear this sound a little bit louder. And I also want to bring the octave down on it. We're going to double click over here and we are going to go to packs and we're going to go to Bog Audio again. You guys notice that I'm really getting a lot of use out of these modules. They really kind of do what they say they're going to do, if you get my drift, and really easy to work with. What I want is just their limiter module, and instead of routing directly out from our amplifier into the mixer, I'm going to route out into the input of this limiter so that I can bring the gain up by default on that sound quite a bit. And let's play this now. Alright. All we need to do now is bring the octave on this sound down a little bit so it's more in the frequency of a bass. And we can do that maybe with just the offset there, but also there's a module from Bog Audio. If we go to Bog Audio and we load up their stack module, there's a really neat function on this that allows us just to change the octave. What we can do is scoot all of our row of modules over here just a little bit so that, yeah, that one will fit in. And we can put that, let's put that actually, yeah, like right here. And let's go, whoops, let's go out from here into the in volt per octave input of the stacked module and the out of that module now into the input of the dual attenuverter. Now, if I press play, it sounds the same, but I can bring that octave down or not. Hold on, what am I doing wrong there? Volt per octave through out into the in. Oh, I see, because the attenuverter is not, I think I need to put it after the attenuverter then. Let's try that. I'm pretty sure that's it. Yeah, and now I can bring the octave of this down using the octave knob here. Okay. Now we're just hearing just plain notes so far, and what we really want to be doing is we want to be, creating some sort of a melody. Now the knobs here are, as we, move them left or right, it's going to change the pitch of our sound, and it's going to change the pitch of our sound as much as we allow it to using the attenuverter. Remember how I said like the amount of like pitch that this is going to spit out on its own is like really wide, from like C1 all the way up to like C8, right? Like a lot of like pitch information there, and we can kind of keep that reined in using the amount of this dial here at the top of the attenuverter. We haven't heard any pitch changes yet because I haven't moved any of these knobs. Now we've got a 6-step sequence because I've set our sequencer to 6 steps. And we can change the pitches on those, just by moving these knobs. the envelope shape of that sound using our really easy to deal with attack and decay here. All right. If I change, sorry about that. If I change the model on the macro oscillator, again, this is the virtual recreation of the braids oscillator from Mutable Instruments. If I change the model, we can get some different timbres out of this. I really like to use this third one down on the left for kind of bass tones. We can sort of adjust the timbre here. And we can sort of make that a darker sound, or bring more of the high frequency content in. Get a little bit more timbre morph over here with the morph knob. And we can mess with the harmonics of the sound with the harmonics knob. I'm gonna leave it at its default position, I think. So now this knob here at the top of the attenuverter is how much, pitch movement are we allowing through. So if I put it to 0, we're back to it's just one note again. But if I roll it all the way up, it's going to give us that entire, range of notes from like C1 all the way up to like C8. Oh, am I saying braids? Thank you, HR Terror. Thank you very much. This is not braids, you guys. This is plats. So I've apologized for that, and big ups to HR Terror. Sorry, guys. This is not braids. This is plats. All right. Sorry about that. But so we can, by moving how much of that pitch information we want to come through, we can really, scale the bass line. All right. This is sounding pretty cool. And what I think we could do is I think maybe we could put some sort of a filter in on this bass sound. So let's go ahead and do that now. If I double tap where I'd like the filter to be, and we just go tags and we go down to the filter section, we can grab a filter to work with. And I think we'll just grab this Bog Audio VCF, super easy to work with. I'm just going to route from the limiter output into the input of this filter. By default, it loads to a low-pass filter, which is what we want today. But we could also turn this filter into a high-pass, a band-pass, or a band-reject filter. We've got control over the resonance, and we've also got control over the slope of the filter, to whether it's like a 2-pole filter, a 4-pole filter. So how steep the curve is of our cutoff. I think we're just going to leave it at a 4-pole filter for now. I'm going to turn the resonance up a tiny little bit, and let's see what this sounds like on our sound. It's got a lot of low frequency content in this sound and not a lot of high frequency content. So I can kind of filter it all the way out down there. Or just sort of keep it really low like it is here. And I kind of like that sound. Let's go ahead and get a little bit of modulation to happen on our bass sound by modulating this timbre knob here a little bit. And what we could do would be to insert an LFO to make this happen so that we can have control over the timing of how it's moving that timbre knob. Let's see, if I want to insert the LFO on the same line that we're working with, I can just double tap here. I can go tags and I can go LFO. Maybe we can choose a super easy to work with LFO like this BPM LFO 2 here. We can take the clock for that LFO and we can route that into the second clock input of our clocked module. I can make this a slower LFO by dividing that output from our main tempo by divided by 4 maybe. And this also needs a reset signal so that our LFO knows when the downbeat is. Pretty much any module that's going to be sending out CV, pitch, or note information, is going to want that reset signal if you want to keep it, really in time with everything else in the project. Just going to take 1 second and check in with the chat, make sure that I'm not missing anything. Yes, in miRack, audible instruments equals mutable instruments. I don't know if the BOG audio is related to any specific real-world manufacturer, but if anyone knows if they are, please let me know, because I'd love to know if that's the case, but I don't think that's the case with the BOG audio. But yes, with the audible instruments, these are virtual recreations of the mutable instruments modules. So you've got the braids module, you've got the plats module, you've got their elements module, the tides module, you've got clouds, which I accidentally just loaded by accident, manage and delete. So you've got clouds, you've got their warps module, you've got rings, their mixer modules, you've got their frames module, and these are really accurate recreations of those modules from mutable instruments. Definitely a bonus in the app being able to have those, if you ask me. So now that we've got our LFO in time with our project, if I press play on the Digitakt, we should see our LFO start to move here, and that's the tempo of our LFO. Just a triangle shape LFO. If I want it to move a little bit slower, which I do, I can come up here and divide our clock tempo by maybe 8. You can watch how that affects the speed of this LFO here. I think I might like it to be even slower than that. So we're going to divide our tempo by 16. And we can see what sort of effect that has on the speed of the LFO. It's moving a little slower now. And that's what I'm looking for. I want to go ahead and take the output of this LFO, and I want to route that into the timbre input on the plats module here that we're using for our bass sound. And we've got an attenuverter built into this module here, so I can control just how much we are moving this knob. If I want to move the knob left, I'll pull the attenuverter left. If I want to move the knob all the way down to the bottom left, I'll pull the attenuverter all the way down to the bottom left. But we can experiment with that at this time. And what I think I want to do is have our LFO moving the timbre knob a little bit to the right. In time with our LFO. So as the LFO is moving down to that middle point, it's opening up the knob, and when it's going back down to its low point, it's closing that knob. And we get control over how much it's moving the knob using the attenuverter here. So if I roll this all the way to the top, now it's moving that knob all the way to the top and back down again. But we just want some subtle movement on this, I think. Just to get a little bit of, interest happening in our bass sound. I'm going to grab another one of the outputs from this LFO, and I'm going to route this into the morph input here of that same oscillator. And we're going to make it so it shifts that knob a little bit to the left for us. What that's going to do is just help the timbre of our bass sound kind of move a little bit in the background without us having to worry about it. We can do the same thing with our filter as well. We can take a CV input to the filter and route that into yet another output from our LFO. If we zoom in all the way, we can see that these outputs are the main output, and then they shifted by 45 degrees, shifted by 90 degrees, and shifted by 180 degrees. This is one of the reasons why I like this LFO, is that you can get 4 sort of differently interacting, modulation sources coming out of this one module. So if we grab, let's see, this one and route that into the CV input of the filter, now we've got an attenuverter here as to which direction we'd like to move our main cutoff knob and how much. So again, if I were to move that CV knob all the way up to the right, our LFO is now going to move our filter knob all the way up to the right at the speed of our LFO and then back down to its position. But we don't really want that. We want just a very small and subtle amount of filter movement happening here. And let's try this. All right. For those of you who may be familiar with my channel, I like to keep Ableton Live up over here on the side with some visual representation plugins so I can kind of get a visual representation of what the frequencies look like that we're working with here. I think we've got a pretty good start. Let's take a look at my mixer level over here and taking a look at the mixer level inside of the stream. Are we coming out too loud, anyone? Am I distorting anyone's phone? Okay, I'm going to check in with the chat real fast. Okay, Googling Bog Audio only returns VCV and miRack stuff. Yeah, I think that Bog Audio is just in software at this time. But these modules are really fantastic and definitely my most used and go-to modules inside of miRack, aside from the mutable instruments modules. Okay. So let's see about getting ourselves on the grid, shall we? You guys know I like to have sort of like a crash and impact sound that happens like either every 8 or every 16 bars to kind of keep us aligned with the grid as we're creating patterns and whatnot. So let's see if we can't create something like that at this time. If I, let's see here, we can probably get that super fast if we just scroll through one of my sound banks for the Digitakt. For those who don't know, I have 7 sound banks for the Electron Digitakt over on my website, Electronisounds.com. And I'm actually working on a brand new series of sound banks. They just updated the firmware for the Digitakt, and they updated their transfer software, which allows us to load and back up samples from the Digitakt. To now, that software will allow us to back up an entire project to one file. So we can do things like, create projects with lots of different samples and lots of different patterns now, and then back that up to one file, whereas until now, we haven't had the ability to do that. So I'm definitely excited about this new update. Okay, and so if I just hold function and press the sound and scroll rather the sound browser knob, it gets us into the sound browser section. And I have my 7 sound banks loaded into bank B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. So if we go to sound bank H, this is my lo-fi dub sound bank, and I can just scroll down through these sounds here and get to the effects section. And I've got like a noise impact crash. There it is, cool. And we can just load that right onto this pad here. And we can put this in on the downbeat of, we can put this in on the downbeat, and we can tell this sound, like, don't play every single time that the pattern plays, because then it's going to trigger every 4 bars. But let's go into the first page here on the conditions, and let's tell this that maybe it should trigger only 1 out of every 2 times that the Digitakt plays through the pattern, essentially making this sound now only trigger once every 8 bars. If that gets too frenetic, we can tell it to trigger just once every 16 bars. But that sort of gives us that downbeat crash symbol that our listener can start to associate, with the downbeat. We can go ahead and adjust these reverb settings in our project to get us a little bit of a longer reverb. Yeah, right on. Do the same thing with the delay. Bring our delay settings up on the Digitakt just a little bit as well. Cool. Alright, let's save. Whoops, right protected. Okay, cool. What let's do is get a save on this project since we've done some stuff now. And what we're going to do is go to the little gear icon here and choose project. Then we're just going to choose save project as, and we'll just scroll down here till we can find a blank spot. Okay. In fact, I'm just going to save over that other new project, and we're just going to go, yes, overwrite new project, absolutely. Let's just clear this, and we'll call this, where's that Y? We'll call this YouTube miRack. One. Cool. Saving. And then let's make sure that we're saved on this side as well. So we're going to go up to the save section here in the upper left, and we're going to choose save. We're going to give this guy a name, and so we're going to call this YouTube miRack Sync O2A or something, because I already did something else in there. And we're going to go save. Cool. So now I've got the project saved on both sides of, the tools here. And I am a chronic oversaver, and I encourage you all to be chronic oversavers as well. You never know what's going to happen. If you have, you've been working for 2 hours maybe, then you have a little power flicker and it resets one of your devices and you lose that 2 hours of work. You don't want that. No matter what happens, just be a chronic oversaver and you'll be backed up, if you get my drift. Okay, let's see here. So we've got both sides saved. We've got a little bit of a bass pattern, and we've got a little bit of a crash impact to sort of keep us on the grid here. We've got our bass line in the key of F minor. If I'm not mistaken, I believe this is a CV input on our envelope that will allow us to have CV control over the decay of our bass sound, and I think that would be a neat thing to automate, actually. So if we were to take an output from our LFO and route that into the second input over here on the attenuverter, we can get control over how much of that LFO signal is coming out. Because there's no built-in attenuverter on this module here, we can go out into the decay, the CV decay input, and my intention is to get that decay knob to move just a little bit as our groove is, progressing. So if I bring up the attenuverter, we get just a little bit of that knob moving our decay. Hopefully we'll be able to hear that in our bass sound now. Yeah, you can absolutely hear it because it's starting to get a little shorter right off the jump. I'm going to bring this up. Yeah, it's really scrolling. We're going to get that longer here and less movement from the knob. It's really bringing it down. I think what I want to do is maybe go the opposite direction. Let's see, is that right? I don't think that's right either. All right. So yeah, it's closing it further than I would like it to close it. So I'm trying to open the decay a little further so that when the CV closes it, it doesn't close it as far. I still want less. Now we're starting to get there. Nope, it's still moving too far. I'm not sure this attenuverter is doing what I want it to do at this time, if you get my drift. Let's find out. Maybe this offset will help me get where I want to go. I think I need to push that this way then. Ooh, we're getting there now, yeah. Basically what I want is the bass to have a little bit of movement in it so that it keeps the listener's interest without us having to do, a ton of extra, knob moving of our own. So now we're moving the filter on our bass sound, but we're also changing the envelope just a tiny little bit as we scroll through this, pattern. All right, I like that. Alrighty. Let's do this. This is something that we've got going today as well that I thought might be fun. Let me have a sip of coffee first, and we'll start this next section. Before I start that, I just want to thank everybody for hanging out today. I know it's been kind of a extra long one because we started at the normal time, but then it sort of crashed and burned on me, and then we sort of reset to this second stream. So thanks to everyone who is hanging out on this one. But what I want to do is I've got my Access Virus Darkstar over here connected up to this whole system as well. I've got the MIDI out on the Digitakt going into the MIDI in on the Darkstar, and I've got the audio outputs of the Darkstar routed into the back of the Digitakt. So when I press play, not only are we syncing miRack at this time, but I'm also got the Darkstar synced up. And this might be a neat thing to maybe just scroll through a couple of presets in the Darkstar randomly that will sync to the tempo of our project and see if anything sounds cool to us and sort of jumps out at us. If I go back to the Digitakt and I tell it that I want to record from the external source of left and right, which is what I've got plugged in here, and then I want to monitor that input. So yes, we should be able to hear whatever's coming out of the virus now. But the thing is that's going to be in sync with our tempo because the MIDI out from the Digitakt is routed into the MIDI in of the Virus Darkstar. All right, so what we can do is, let's see here, if I just play this. Oh, I see. Do I have, because of the MIDI 1. So let's see here. Where can I get that? MIDI config global channel. Will that still put the timing? Yeah, cool. Okay. Bring that down. Okay, because of the 1, so sorry about that. Let me just think this through for 1 second. This was on 1, but that's on 1, so those notes are coming through. But what I could do, if I put this here, then that no longer the sync. Interesting. Those on the 1. But what I want is I want to send the tempo out now on channel 4. So can I do that if I assign one of the MIDI channels, perhaps? Let's see here. If I assign this MIDI channel here, if I turn on the MIDI channel and I tell it that I want to be on channel 4, I should be able to, let's see here. No. All right, well, I'm not going to spend too much time worrying about that. Okay, but so, all right. Let's just see over here again and edit. Oops, config rather. I put it on 3, I see. So can I try that? Channel 3. Yeah. So if I make that note, if I make this trigger note like an F3, is that gonna, let's see here. Yeah, fantastic. Let's see what we can find here. If anything, maybe. Ooh, we've got some risers here that might actually be cool. We'll get back to that later, maybe. All right, well, we're not going to go down another rabbit hole, is the thing. I thought that would work easy, but I'm actually having a little bit of difficulty because the MIDI channels are conflicting with each other. So rather than struggle on the stream, we're just going to go ahead and pass on getting that going, I think, because it's not cooperating. And I don't want to spend too much time on that. All right. Okay, so let me see here. What did I do wrong to get this not working now? Right, I turned off those MIDI tracks. So all we have to do is turn those back on, and we're back in. Okay. I'm going to put us in a scale of just plain old F minor rather than pentatonic. And I think that's sounding a little better already. There it is. That's a little bit better with the bass. I think we can bring that impact sound down a little bit. All right. So we basically have the option now as to what we'd like to do, as to whether we want to add something inside of miRack or add something else inside the Digitakt, because we're totally synced up. The last thing we added was that impact sound inside of the Digitakt. Then I had a little fail with the virus there, but we're going to not worry about that so much. And I think we'll add something else inside of miRack then at this time. And maybe what we could do would be to add like a sample player. Even though, you know, we're working with samples in the Digitakt, we can also work with samples in miRack, and that sort of allows us, you know, to have almost like a second, sample bank expansion if we want to, approach it that way. But if I go to tags and if we go to sampler, we can load up this really easy to use quad sampler, and we can let's see, go to the move section. I can just maybe bring this down to the third row here. And we have a couple of options actually as to how we'd like to trigger the samples that we want to load into this module. We can actually trigger these samples from the Digitakt by routing the outputs of our MIDI module here and using the rest of the MIDI tracks on the Digitakt to trigger these. That might be a neat way to get set up. So maybe rather than putting this on the bottom row, maybe I'll just put this up here for now so that it's a little bit closer to that top section so I don't have to do as much zooming. And maybe we could take the next output here of our MIDI trigger input module, which is receiving MIDI from the Digitakt, and maybe we could grab that output and route that in to the trigger input of our sample module. We want to tell our sample module that I want to play back one-shot samples and not like loops or anything. So I'm just going to hold down, I'm going to highlight and turn on that one-shot mode. That means it's just going to, trigger the sample and play through it one time, I can take the, let's see, the output from this, and I can route that into like the mixer channel here, and then we can double click on the the sample slot, and I can choose open a wave file to put in slot 1. Now we just want to make sure that we're in the browse, and then I can go to on my iPad, and wherever you've got your samples stored in your iPad is where you're going to go here. But I've got my samples mostly stored inside of Beatmaker 3, so I can go inside of these directories here to get to like my sample banks and whatnot. I can go to Electronisounds, and we can find something that we can use for a clap here. So we could go to let's see here. Maybe the reflective pack probably has a clap in it. Let's see, drums, and snares, claps, and rims, and now I got a folder of snares, claps, and rims here that I can grab. The thing is with miRack is you don't get to preview. Like if you hover over a sound, it just loads that sound. You don't get to like preview it first per se. Well, let's go ahead and say we want to use that clap sound for now, and I've routed this D2 patch point into the trigger input there. So we know we want to trigger that note on a D, but if you remember, this is 1 octave off. So rather than actually triggering a D2, I want to trigger a D3. And we can put that on the first row of, the first MIDI track here. Again, there's 8 tracks at the top for the inbuilt sounds of the Digitakt, and these 8 tracks at the bottom are MIDI tracks to sequence external gear. So if we go to the source page rather, for MIDI track 9, and we hold function, it's already turned on. If it wasn't turned on, it would be X'd out there, and we just want to turn it on where it says channel. I'm going to set that to channel 1, although actually, hold the phone. I think I might have just solved my problem. The Digitakt is receiving all channels. So, for instance, I could set this to channel 16 and it should still receive that. And I should be able to set our bass trigger our other triggers to that same channel, and they should trigger it as well. And then maybe we would have control over the virus again. Let me see if that's correct. It seems like it is correct. So we're still going here, even though I've changed those MIDI channels. And this MIDI channel here is on 16 too, so that's fine. All right. What we want to do is I just want to put in the actual notes for this clap to trigger, and we're just going to put in a standard, clap on all 4 bars here. Now, if I press play, we should be. Oh, we need to tell that MIDI track what note I'm sending out. So if we go to the trigger page, when that track is selected, I can select again. It says D2, but I really want to send it a D3. So I'm going to change over here the note that I'm sending to a D3, and suddenly we're hearing a clap, and it's triggering my clap sample there. And so, when I stop the Digitakt, it stops all that stuff, and when I press play, it starts all that stuff. Now, what's the benefit of triggering the clap from the Digitakt rather than triggering it from a sequencer inside of miRack? Well, now when I make different patterns inside of the Digitakt, we can have that clap, turn on, turn off, or do different patterns of, clapping within our patterns. So we've got the clap. I think I might like it to be just a little bit louder. And I'm going to take a look at my visualizers here and make sure we're doing okay. So we've got a tiny little bit more high frequency content than I would like to be coming through on these hi-hats. And we're going to fix that really quickly by just grabbing ourselves another mixer real fast. We're going to go tags, and we're going to go mixer, and I'm just going to grab the 4-channel mixer from Bog Audio, and instead of routing the output of our hats directly into our main drum mixer, I'm going to route these into a separate mixer now, all on its own. And what we're going to do is we're going to double click right next to that mixer, double click, and we're going to add an EQ. So if I go to tags and I go, actually let's grab another filter, make this even easier. We can grab tags and filter, and I can just grab this VCF here from Bog Audio. We can zoom in a little bit, and we can change the slope here down to a very gentle filter. So its default is like a 4-pole slope, and if I bring it down to a 1-pole filter, now it's more like a 6 decibels per octave filter. Up at 2 poles, it's more of a 12 decibels per octave filter, and over here at 4 the slope is more like 24 decibels per octave. So this is a really gentle filter slope here. This is like 6 decibels per octave, if that makes any sense to you. I'm going to take the output of our mixer and I'm going to route that into this filter, and I'm going to take the output of that filter and route it back into our main drum mixer. What that's done is given me a really really gentle low-pass filter that I can use to take just the top amount of the frequencies, very, very top amount of the frequencies off of those hi-hats. If I keep the filter all the way open, we won't hear it. And I should be able to roll that down gently and filter out those hi-hats, you know. But that's not what I'm looking for. I'm not trying to filter out the hi-hats. I just want to remove the very, very top frequencies that are coming through a little bit hotter than they should. Excellent. So now, if I look over here at the visualizer, and I can actually show you guys real quick. Whoop. Now, the top end of our frequency spectrum is right in line, and it's not going above like where it should go. All right. That's not plugged in, and we're going to need that plugged in, so let me do that real fast. Just putting a battery power on this camera here so that we don't lose power as the phone battery runs out. That's better. Alright, I'm going to take a second and check in with the chat, see if you guys are still with me. Alright. Looks like there's some serious conversations going on in the chat. Right on. Sweet. Hey, thanks, Slim. It's a 6-step arpeggio, and I actually got the idea to use 6 steps in my arpeggio by watching, like, it wasn't a tutorial per se, but I was watching a YouTube video on Richie Houghton talking about, you know, like his new setup. I think this was like last year or whatnot, and he was expressing like his love for just using a lot of 6-step arpeggios for the project that he was working on. So that just kind of stuck to me, like Richie Houghton, like 6-step arpeggios. So every now and again I kind of do that, you know, when I'm sort of like thinking about making techno per se. And let's see here. So we've got the clap. So we've got a bass line and the clap coming from miRack. And we've got the rest of the drums and the impact sound coming from the Digitakt. And now what we're going to try to do is get the Darkstar going in the mix again. Because it's really an awesome way to use the Digitakt as like the brain. You know, this is kind of what I wanted to show today. How we can use it, you know, with more devices. And we're going to sample into it, hopefully, at the same time that we're using it to sequence external gear. See if I can get that glare down just the tiniest bit on this camera, maybe. I'm not sure. Okay, but let's go back here. I got the MIDI channel back on 1. So if I'm not mistaken, if I press 1 here, if I press go here, then we should sync up on this side. And let's find out with this preset here. Okay, so there's our tempo. Yeah. Nope. It's not quite. What? Okay. Is that because I changed? I don't know. It should really be the same, but it doesn't want to be. So we're not going to worry about it. Okay. 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 He kept trying to get the virus in, and he kept having problems. Oh my goodness. All right. So we're passing on the virus yet again so that we can move forward. Let's think, though, what we want to do. We're in the key of F. So let's bring in, like, either a chord stab or a second arpeggio. We've got, like, a kind of an arpeggio for the bass line. We could bring in, like, an arpeggio for, like, a synth riff. Do you guys want to bring in another arpeggio, or should we try to go with a chord stab? Do you think arp, or do you think chord? Let me play what we've got. What do you think we should add over this? Should we add a chord, or should we add an arp over this, you guys? Alright, we got 2 votes for dubstab. Let's see about that then. what let's do is then let's decide, do we want to try to make the chord stab in miRack, or do we want to load up a sample in the Digitakt? So miRack or the Digitakt for the chord stab? What do you think, guys? All right. Yeah, we got back in 10 mil. I didn't super want to be like a total quitter, and I was able to do a hard reboot on the Digitakt, a hard reboot on the iPad, and then I removed the MIDI controller from the equation between these two devices. So currently, it's just this one USB cable connecting the Digitakt to the iPad, and there's no powered USB hub in between them, and there's no MIDI controller, unfortunately. But that does seem, you know, to get it going. All right, so we're going to do chord and we're going to do Digitakt. For those of you who are participating in the chat, thanks very much. I really appreciate it. All right. We're in the key of F minor, and let's see what we can find to load. I'm just going to play the groove, and we'll scroll through some samples, I think, and see if I can find something. I've got like a folder of, you know, random samples that I've recorded into here, as well as some of my sample packs. We're sure we can find something. Just going to go into the samples section. This is my miscellaneous samples folder. What do I got in here? Whoops. My miscellaneous sample of recorded stuff. Let's see if I can find like an F minor chord that we might want to use today. Why am I not? What the? So if we want to put that on. There we go. Let me keep scrolling. Let me know if I get too loud or if I start exploding anyone's phone with volume. Kind of like that ride for later, maybe. That might work. We'll go ahead and load that up. Load to project. All right. Okay, so we can go ahead and get that chord sound that we've loaded. We can get that assigned to a pad now by just selecting which pad we'd like to assign it to, and make sure we're in the source page, and we can just scroll through the samples that are loaded in our project to get that chord sample onto a pad. We can really douse it with reverb and delay, right? Alright, and let's play the groove and see if it kind of slots in anywhere. If I go to the second page here in the Digitakt, the source page, and we can click that 2 times, we can actually get into a view that shows the sample, and I can move the start point, you know, anywhere throughout that sound to make it maybe more of a shorter or a punchy sound, you know? That's kind of nice. Trying to decide if I want this on the downbeat or on the upbeat today. I think upbeat today. Let's just give that some life and movement, shall we? The Digitakt allows us to assign one LFO on every sound that we load into it. So I can assign an LFO to this sound here, and I can assign that to the filter cutoff frequency. We can change the beats per minute, the timing on this LFO, and make it very, very slow. And tell this LFO just to casually, sweep back and forth and give a little bit of variation on our dubstep, hopefully. Sometimes this takes a little bit of tweaking and finesse, to get it right where you want it to be. Make it go slower still. And not as far down on the filter cutoff. Chord back in the mix a little. Taking a look at the visualizer here, see how we're doing. Just fine. Try to make this filter down just a little more. Yeah, I agree, Slim. I'm really not a fan of MIDI over USB either, and definitely when I can use 5-pin MIDI, I do. Even with the devices, that have a USB MIDI, if they have both, I'm typically trying to use that 5-pin MIDI. Most of all, for sure, absolutely. Okay. Would be sweet to modulate that sample start point. All right, that's a great idea. The problem with that is that in the Digitakt, we only have one LFO. And so I have a choice, basically. We can choose to assign that LFO to the cutoff of the frequency, or the frequency cutoff, rather, or we could assign that LFO to the sample start, so that each time the sample played, it started in sort of a different position of the sample. But since I've already got the LFO assigned to the filter frequency, that doesn't really leave me a way to assign it now to move that start point. It's something that I would really, really have loved if they would have done in the Digitakt. I know there's only, so much CPU power in these boxes they have to work with and whatnot, but if we had two LFOs per sound, that would really open up so much more. I think the Octatrack has either 2 per sound or 3 per sound, I'm not sure, and it just gives you that extra level of design. So we could be filtering, but also changing the start point of that sample. That's a great suggestion, and I wish we could do that at the same time. Let's go ahead and get that ride in that I loaded up, which was I found a 606 ride sample just, randomly in my folder of samples while we were looking for this chord. So maybe we'll put that onto pad number 4. If we just select the pad we want to assign a sample to, we can scroll through all of the samples that are in the project, and I can just grab that 606 ride sample that I loaded previously. We can maybe put this in as like an 8th note, dun, 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 kind of a ride sound, and then tuck it back in the mix from here. We can maybe leave it a little louder than I would want it, so I can adjust the tuning and maybe see if it seats in the mix if we tune it down a little bit. I like it better there, yeah. Bring it down in the mix quite a bit, that ride symbol. But what we'll do to give that ride a little bit of sort of bounce feeling as well, I think is this is just 8th notes, dun 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 dun. And so what we could do is maybe kind of vary the velocity on these, and we could sort of go in and tell the rides that happen on the same, on the same exact note as the kick drum, we could bring those down in velocity. By default, the velocity is like 100. So maybe on these rides, we could bring the velocity on these down to 75. So the ride that hits when the kick drum is more of a lower volume. We're almost kind of creating like a sidechain pumping type of effect by doing this. If I just go through, whoops, actually I don't need to go through all pages. I can just do that on one page and then copy the whole page of triggers by holding page and copy. Going to the next page now, we're on page 2 is highlighted, and I want to hit page and paste all those triggers back in. Going to page 3, page and paste, page 4, page and paste. And now I've just, got all of those velocities on all 4 pages. Now our ride is sounding like a little bit more of an upbeat ride as opposed to just a little bit more variation in that. And when I add a ride or something like that, I'll typically, make sure that we're not pushing too much high frequency content as we're adding that new sound in. And we're not, so that's good. Visualizers are looking okay. Maybe bring that ride down in the mix the tiniest little bit more. And maybe pan it a little bit to the left, like very little to the left, like just 7 maybe. To sort of give it its own, space in the acoustic field. Alright, let's save at this time. Let's go ahead and see if we can't bring something else in from miRack at this time. Let me just jump in with the chat, make sure that I'm not missing anything. Yeah, LFO. The more LFOs you can have, like modulating stuff, that's the beauty of using stuff like miRack, is that we can just keep adding LFOs and modulating other things. So let's make sure that the next thing that we add inside of miRack, that we put an awful lot of built-in modulation to. Let's go ahead and maybe get another type of chord, type of sound. I really like that chilled play when you get like one type of chord sound playing off of another type of chord sound. So if we go, let's see, where am I going to put this? I'll just put this on the 3rd line, I guess, 3rd row rather. And let's go to packs. And let's go to the Audible Instruments packs, which again are the recreations of the mutable instruments modules here. Let's just grab another Platts module today because it's really easy to work with and easy to get a chord out of that sounds good. What let's do is if we zoom in here, we can see that there's quite a few different modes. And if I press this button on the left, it cycles through the modes on the left. If I press the button on the right, it turns red and cycles through the modes on the right. If I go down to this mode here on the left, second from the bottom, this is a chord mode. And we can get this in key with our track by telling the module what note we'd like it to play. If I don't adjust the frequency knob at all when I load the module up, it's going to be tuned to a C by default. We'd like it to be tuned to an F because that's the key that we're writing in. We can do that really easily by just double tapping where I want to load a module. We can go to tags and we can scroll down to tuner, and I can choose this reference tone module from Bog Audio, and I can tell this that I would like it to be at the pitch of F3. Okay, so now anything I take out of this volt per octave, I'm sending an F3 signal to that. I can route that into the volt per octave on this macro oscillator here. And I know we're going to need, some interesting things to create like rhythm and filtering on this sound. So we can go ahead and just grab that before we start connecting it up because we know we're going to need more things. So let's go ahead and go back into the menu. And we're going to need an envelope generator on this. So we're going to go to tags and we're going to go to envelope generator. I'm just going to grab that really simple one that we've been using the last few sessions where it allows us to route a trigger signal into it from a trigger sequencer, and that triggers the envelope. We can adjust the attack and the decay of the envelope. So it's just a really simple envelope. It's not like an ADSR, it's just an AD envelope. We're going to need a way to sequence this. And I think we'll do that from the Digitakt in a creative way, right? We have 3 of the MIDI tracks on the Digitakt being used already. We've got the MIDI tracks on the right, 15 and 16, being used for our clock signal and our reset signal into miRack. And then we've got the MIDI track 9. This is triggering the clap sample inside of miRack. So again, so when I trigger here, we're playing that sample back there. I think we're going to use the next MIDI track over, track 10, to trigger that envelope. So whenever I hit, the key over here, it will send this, will trigger that envelope signal. We're going to go trigger input and route that into the next output here of our MIDI trigger input module. So that says D2. So, whenever I send a D2 to that module, it's going to send the trigger output out of there, except that we know that we're an octave off here. So I really need to send a D sharp 3, not a D sharp 2. So I just need to go into the MIDI track itself, hold function and channel to turn it on. I'm going to turn this to channel 16 because that's what I've got the other ones set to now. And because I was trying to do the virus thing, but it didn't quite work out. So I've got everything set to 16, and we'll just, keep setting them to 16 at this time. Yeah. And the MIDI trigger input here in miRack is accepting MIDI on all channels. So it's good there. All I need to do then is tell this MIDI track that when I hit this note that it should trigger out a D sharp 3 note, and we can set that here in the Digitakt, D sharp 3 on that note. Now it's coming out of here whenever I hit this note, and we can use that to trigger this envelope. And so we're going to need a VCA next to this, which is an amplifier. So that's going to create the volume. It's the envelope that's going to be opening and closing our amplifier. So if we go to tags, we can go to amplifier and VCA. Then we can just grab this really simple VCA from Bog Audio. Now VCA is just it's an amplifier. It's a it's a voltage controlled amplifier. And the voltage is the envelope generator that we're creating when we, send the trigger signal to this envelope generator. We're going to go ahead and take the envelope output, and we're going to route that into the CV. This is our control voltage, to the control voltage input of our VCA. And we just need to take the output now of our VCA and route that into our mixer. Actually, I think I'm going to want to have more control over the volume here. So we're going to grab that limiter that I like to use. If we go packs and we go to Bog Audio, they have that really great limiter that's really easy to use and really easy to add up to 24 decibels of gain really simply with. That's why I like to use it. We're going to take the out from our envelope into the in of that limiter, and we're going to take the out of that limiter and route it into our second mixer up here, which is our melodics mixer. Mixer on the left, I'm routing drums into. Mixer on the right, I'm routing melodics into. Okay, here. So, if I'm not mistaken, let's see, D sharp 3, and that's triggering the envelope, and the envelope is coming out into here, and then we just need the output. Whoops, I grabbed that wrong, is what I did. And, okay, the last thing we need is we need to route the actual oscillator itself into our amplifier here. So we're going to take the output of our oscillator and we're going to route that into the input of our voltage controlled amplifier. And there we go. Now, when I'm hitting the trigger over here, we are triggering this envelope. And I can make that gain louder, so we can hear the sound, right? We can make it a long envelope, so that this sound, decays out for a long time. Or we can make it a really short envelope, right? Even really, really short, right? We can bring the attack up on that so the sound fades in if we hold it down. Right? That's kind of cool, but I like the attack all the way down so we get more of a percussive chord sound here. And now we can just kind of mess around and see if we can't get this to sit in the mix with what we've created already. We can adjust, the way our chord sounds using the harmonics over here. Nice little minor chord here. And we can adjust the timbre of this chord. And we can adjust this morphing over here as well. A lot of different, potential timbres that we can get out of something like this. Okay, I think that might work a little bit with the rhythm we've created already. Let's see. Just trying to mess with the timbre of the sound and see where we, like it sitting. Alright, let's see what happens if we bring this sound down an octave. I think we can do that super easily over here just by bringing this down to an F2. Yeah. Not sure that's going to get us where we want to go. You get a lot of different tonality out of the chord sound when you move these timbre and morph knobs. I'm just trying to get it to see if we can get it to sit in the mix a little bit by morphing those around a little. Cool. Let's go ahead and put some reverb on this, shall we? And filter out some of the low frequency content from this chord. If we go to the tags section and we go to the equalizer section, we can just grab this EQ right here. We can take the output and we can easily just route that into our mix so that we can bring some of the low frequencies down off of our chord stab there. Yeah, absolutely. See, we can zoom in this far so we can really get in there. I find it's really easy to use the Apple Pencil with some of these, really small buttons and whatnot. Trying to use it with your hands sometimes is difficult, but definitely zooming in and zooming out is definitely a big part of the workflow with using miRack, Lawrence. Let's see here. I think let's try to add a little bit of reverb to this new chord stab at this time. I'm just going to double click here and go to tags. We're going to go down to the reverb section and grab this plateau module. We're going to go ahead and just route this into the the audio routing here of our chord. So left into the left and then left out from the plateau reverb into the mixer. I'm just going to route this mono for now. I'm going to bring that dry wet way down to start with. Let's see what we've got here. Have this chord not trigger quite as much. every other time. Let's try that. Yeah, better. Like that a little bit. Maybe we could put a filter on this new chord as well by just double clicking where we want to put it, going to tags and going over to the filter. We can just grab this plain, really easy to use VCF from Bog Audio. And I'd like to put this before the reverb, I think, so that it goes into the filter and then goes into the reverb, and we're not actually filtering the reverb itself. I'm going to take this and just route that into the chain here. And what we can do is let's listen to this. Bring up the resonance on this maybe. Cool. Oh yeah. Awesome. So now our new chord, has a filter on it, and what we can do is maybe take an output from our LFO here and use that to filter, the movement on that new chord very slowly. We could take the CV input on this filter, and we could route that into one of the outputs of the LFO. And then if we zoom in on the filter, we can control how much of the filter we're moving using this CV knob here. Maybe I'll set the filter down to pretty low, about 1K by default, and we'll have the modulation move that knob up quite a bit, and let's see how that affects our groove. Ooh, that sounds really interesting, Tony. I like the sound of that. Really awesome if we could see this filter knob moving in real time, so we kind of had an idea, but unfortunately the knobs that you automate inside of miRack don't actually start moving in real time. So it's just kind of a matter of sort of listening to the groove and seeing how it comes together that way. But what I think I really want to do today is to get something inside of miRack to automagically turn on and off, so that we haven't created a lot of patterns today, different patterns, but that would definitely be a way to progress and flesh out a session like this. And in addition to being able to change to different patterns from the Digitakt, if we use miRack and we program something to automagically turn on and off, like every 8 bars or every 16 bars, you can get some neat movement that is happening on its own as you're still changing the patterns inside of the Digitakt. So let's do something really simple inside of miRack that does exactly what I said. Let's try to get a part happening, a really simple part that will turn on and off either every 8 bars or every 16 bars. Let's do a really simple thing, like just a shaker rhythm at this time. So this is a quad sampler. We've got one sample loaded into it only. I can just load another sample into this. We can double click on the second sample window, and I can just choose open wave in slot number 2. Again, depending on where you've got your samples stored inside of your iPad is where you're going to navigate to. I've got mine inside of Beatmaker 3, and we're pretty much here already. What I want though is I want shake. Okay, cool. Here's some shakers, and again, we don't get to preview it before we load it. It just kind of loads, and then we can check it out at that time. Let's go ahead and assign the next MIDI output from our MIDI trigger input to trigger a shaker sample. If I route the output here from our MIDI, which is coming from the Digitakt, if I route that into the trigger input over here on the quad simpler, now we can get that routed. And don't forget that we're an octave off, so even though this says E2, I really want to trigger an E3. I'm going to take the next blank MIDI track in the Digitakt. I'm going to tell that when I hit that note, it should spit out an E3. Okay, E3. And now when I hit that note, we're sending out this trigger signal through the patch point here, and that is triggering our shaker sample over here if we were playing, right? Not yet. Actually, it doesn't really make any sense to sequence it from the Digitakt if we're going to make it automagically turn off. I think I'm approaching that conceptually incorrect. So let's take these triggers off rather, and let's not try to trigger it from the Digitakt, but let's trigger it from miRack rather. And to do this, we just need a way to send it 16th notes, I think, and we could just use our master clock for that at this time. So we could take the trigger here, and we could route this into our main clock. And if I'm not mistaken, that's going to trigger our shaker at 16th notes. And definitely it is. That's what I want. Fantastic. Okay. So that we can hear this sound, we're just going to start by routing it directly into the mixer, right? I'm just going to route that in on this channel in case it's a little loud. I'll turn it down. It's not too loud, so we'll turn it up so we can hear it. Awesome. I like the way that sounds in the mix, so we're going to go with that shaker sample rather than trying to load a different shaker sample. But so now if I press play, that shaker sample just goes, 16th notes, 16th notes. Yeah, we're going out from the shaker into the input of the drum mixer, which I'm using kind of the mix 8 on the left for drum sounds and the mix 8 on the right for melodic sounds. So we've got this routed directly into our mixer, but I'm going to take that out so it's not going into the mixer. And we're going to make this automagically turn on and off with this awesome module that I found called Flow. I'm not exactly sure where that is, but they're all blue, so we can find it in just a sec, I'm sure. If I just scroll through these, you can see just how many modules there are installed here from all these different companies. But what I'm looking for, yeah, here we go. These are the MI brand, whatever that is, and there's tons of modules here that do all sorts of things. But what I'm looking for is this one here, and this is called Flow. And basically, I'm going to use this module to turn on and off the flow of information, whether that be the flow of audio or whether that be the flow of CV. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take the output, the audio output of our shaker sound, and we're going to route that into the input of the flow module. Now it just needs a reset signal so that it knows when the downbeat is. So we're going to take reset, and we're going to patch that into our reset signal. Now we're going to take the output of this module, which is the audio out of our shaker. We're going to patch that right back into our mixer. I'm going to zero that out again, and if I want to have more volume control over that, actually I'm just going to bring in that compressor again. So let's go to packs, let's go to Bog Audio, and let's bring in not the compressor rather, but the limiter. And again, I'm not really looking to limit anything, but this module has a really easy to use just plus 24 decibels of gain, and I really like being able to have that extra volume or gain control over some of these sounds. So there we go. We've got the shaker routed into flow. This is the audio. We've got the audio of the shaker routed into the limiter, so I can bring up the volume, on that a couple decibels if we need to. You can see that it's just, every time I hit play now, it's just triggering via 16th notes. We've got this extra input though. we basically have an on and off switch, and we have an external input. And what the external input is doing is it's just basically waiting for a trigger signal. And when it receives that trigger signal, it's going to mute the flow of either audio or CV going through that module until it receives yet another trigger signal, at which point it will turn the flow of information back on again. So what we could do is we could take our master reset signal that we set up earlier in the Digitakt, coming out of, I believe it was track number 16 here. But what that's doing is that's sending out a reset signal into miRack on the downbeat of every 16 bars. Okay, that's our master reset signal here that's coming out of the second MIDI output. If I take our external signal and I route that into that trigger, now the module is going to be accepting that trigger and turning on and off the flow of information every time it receives that. So every 16 bars, it's going to either turn on the shakers or turn off the shakers. Check this out, you guys. 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, and 5, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8. Let's do it again. 9, 2, 3, 4, 10, 2, 3, 4, 11, 12, and 13, 14, and 15, and 16. Bye-bye, shaker. Oh, it didn't work. See that if I hit the knob, it turns the shaker on and off. It's not a knob, rather it's a button. And I'm not sure why that didn't work. I think maybe it's looking for a gate signal rather than a trigger signal. No, that's not right. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and just take that signal out of the external trigger and try a different way to do that. So we're going to go ahead and let's put in a sequencer at this time so we can put in our own, signal at the time we want it to be. So we're just going to double click over here. We're going to go to tags. We're going to go down to sequencer. We're going to grab that really easy to use 3x16, and we're just going to sit it next to, our modules here. This is going to need a clock signal. So we're going to run this into our main clock here. Actually, we're going to need a slower clock on that, but we definitely need the reset. So we're going to run this into our main reset. I'm going to check in with the chat in just a minute, see if I'm missing anything, but let's get this going before I do that. We're going to put a trigger in on the downbeat, and we're going to take the trigger out from this sequencer and route that into the external signal of the flow module. And all I need now is I just need to slow down the tempo that this sequencer is running so that it, hits this one trigger every 16 or every 8 bars. And that should turn on and off the flow of information through our flow module. Let me use the third clock divider here and just make this a divided by 4 clock for now. Now when I press to play, we can see that it, it turned our module off. Okay, now it's turning it back on again. Not quite working exactly as I would expect it to. So let's take the reset out from the flow module. And let's see about this. Let me see if I can count this out. Yeah, so it's turning it either on or off right here on the, I think I just needed to get rid of that reset signal. It's turning the flow button either on or off now every time I hit, play over here on the Digitakt. 5, 2, 3, 4, 6, 2. No, it's not counting it correctly though. Why is that? Why is that? Why is that? Why is that? Let's divide this by 8 and see what happens. And basically, we've got our reset here. I've got my da-da-da. Let's try that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, and 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4. Waiting for this button to change. And 7. 8, 2, 3, 4. Nope, I don't have it yet. Is it that instead? That can't be right, is it? No, that's not what I want. I'm not sure, then. I'm having a little bit of an issue here getting this to work as expected. Let's go back to just our normal clock speed so that I can reset to reset. Yeah, I mean, I'm confused as to why we're not getting this timing to the grid a little better. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2. Yeah, it's cutting on the off there. Oh, I know why. Okay, I'm going to zoom in and try to show you why. Our sequencer is not set to a full 16 steps for some reason. So I'm going to, on this very top row here, I'm going to set that to 16 steps. And now it's going to go through the full 16 steps, and everything and all that counting will all be back to where it should be. Ugh, give me a break. Sorry about that, you guys. I'm going to put the reset from the flow module back into the main reset signal. Okay, and I'm going to take our external signal, which is expecting a trigger signal to the flow, out of the sequencer here. Now we should be back on the grid. Sorry about that, everyone. 4, 2, 3, and change it. Okay, fantastic. We are back on the grid. This is exactly what we need. Okay, so all I need to do is on the module that's sending clock here, we just need to slow that clock down. Let's try divided by 4. And let's count that out and make sure that this is automagically now turning on and off the shakers every, I believe, 8 bars. 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4. Let's do it again. 5, 2, 3, 4, 6, 2, 3, 4, 7, 2, 3, 4. Cross the fingers, turn it off. Nope. If we set to 16 then, we're going to go another 8. See if that shuts it off. Yeah, it will. And 2, 3, and 3, 2. Here comes the trigger. Nope, it still didn't. Hold the phone here, because again, this is a module that I tested out already. What am I doing wrong here? With a switch or a CV signal input. Yeah, that's what I'm sending it. Get rid of that reset signal. Yeah. Okay, that seems to fix it for us. No worries. Okay, so I've taken out the reset signal. Apparently the flow isn't liking that reset, and we don't really need it because this module itself is getting a reset. So it knows when the downbeat is, and it's the thing that's sending our trigger signal to the flow. So let's just go over this one more time. We've got our clock running on its own tempo, and basically these triggers, you know, are going through 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, and 4, 2, 3, 4. So basically every 16 bars, it's going to turn our shaker on and off. I'd like to try to make that every 8 bars. So let's take this divided by 4 clock and change that to a divided by 2 clock. Now let's go back over here to our flow module and just verify that it is turning on and off every 8 bars. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, and 5, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7, and 8. And turn the shakers off. Okay, now we've got the flow module working as expected. And every 8 bars, it's just going to turn those shakers on and off for us. And 1, 2, here comes the shakers. I hope that makes sense now that we've got that set up, you guys. Go ahead and pan those shakers a little bit to the right and bring them down in the mix. Yeah. Alright, I'm going to check in with the chat here, see if I've missed anything. It's been a long time to get through that little section there. Sorry, everyone. Yeah, Andy, this is like a lot of money in real-world modules. You've got over 500 modules inside of miRack so far, and you can keep loading, you know, duplicates of the same module. So you've easily got, you know, like over $100,000 worth of real-world modules here if you just start loading them up. If you get my drift, a really awesome way, I think, to get into Eurorack, because this works, you know, the same way as real-world Eurorack. So as you're learning how to do this, you're not just learning an iPad app, is what I mean. You're actually learning, you know, Eurorack in general. Hey, what's happening, Jim? Thanks for tuning in. All right. I appreciate everyone's patience today, especially through the weird false start that we had getting going today. I just want to stress again that seemed to be because I had the MIDI controller routed in between the Digitakt and the iPad via a powered USB hub. That seemed to really create some anomalies for us, and it didn't seem to like that. So we're currently connected with the Digitakt to the iPad with just this one USB cable between the two. And the Digitakt is set to receive and transmit audio and MIDI over USB. So there's no audio interface today for the iPad. The audio is coming in through the Digitakt. So we've got like the kick drum and some stuff in the Digitakt, but we're also sequencing things inside of miRack. And let's go ahead and save in both applications at this time. Save and save. Fantastic. And here's what we've got so far. And these shakers will automatically just turn on and off for us every 8 bars. And there comes those shakers. Yeah, cool, man. A little variation on that kick drum. So every now and again when it turns around, we get that bump bump bump. Yeah. I'll make it like I don't know, like how about 41% chance that we get that turnaround kick, right? Put a tiny variation on that. So we can hear that it's just a tiny bit different. And save. Dun dun bum bum bum. Cool. Actually, let's put that in again and make that even less likely to happen on that last note. Like hardly ever, like 9% chance that we'll get it happening here, you know? Cool. Wait a minute. Yeah, we've lost our bass sound here for some reason. I'm not exactly sure why. I'm trying to figure that out here. Into the melodic side of things. Turn the volume down just a little bit here, so I can not have to yell over the... It should be coming in here, but we seem to not be getting it, which is a shame for sure. It's still playing and everything's routed. I'm not sure why we're not hearing that anymore. Boy, man, today is the day of anomalies, isn't it? We've lost our bass line. I can see that it's spitting the note information through the system. Oh boy. All right. Well, regardless of that, I think we're probably getting close to wrapping it up today anyhow. And what I really wanted to get across today was just how we can sync these up. We did have a little bit of anomaly in the beginning with the MIDI controller. We're having some sort of an anomaly now, which is a little bit frustrating. But for the rest of the things, they seem to be working as expected. I'm just not sure why we're no longer getting this bass part. But we are definitely not getting it. Just for curiosity's sake, I'm going to go ahead and save this patch and restart miRack and just sort of see if that has any benefit to our progress. It in fact did, and we've gotten our bass sound back. Well, that's a weird one. For some reason, I mean, you guys heard that here. We didn't, saw that and heard that. We didn't really do anything, but suddenly the bass stopped playing. We saved and rebooted the app, and suddenly our bass is back. That's definitely frustrating. I'm not sure what caused that per se. we're back in. So that's good. I think that bass line might be a little too loud in the mix now. Let's just turn that down a tiny bit. Make sure that our shakers are still turning on and off here. Turn those shakers off now. Yeah, cool. Let's do the same thing on this side with that clap, shall we? Let's make it so the clap automagically turns on and off. Let's take the output of that clamp sample and route it into the second input of the flow. And let's take, let's see here. Let's take that exact same trigger signal. No, we can't? Okay. Let's duplicate that trigger signal, shall we? Let's put in, go to packs, not PAGs, rather. We're going to go to packs, and we're going to go to the audible instruments section. Here we can choose their multiple, which allows us to plug multiple things sort of into one and get both of those out. So we can go like trigger into the input here, and now I have 3 outputs that are outputting that exact same trigger signal. So I can, let's see here, external signal here and external signal here. Now I'm controlling both of these switches using that same trigger signal. If I want them to be the same, like to both turn on and off together, I can, just put them in the same state per se, or we could have one turn off while the other one turns on, and that might be an interesting way to approach it. But let's just route the audio here, which is the audio of our clap, and route that back to the mixer. So currently we've got our shakers playing, but our clap is not being heard. In 1, 2, and 1, 2, change it now. Now our shakers turn off and our clap comes on. I think we can bring that clap up in the mix for sure. Yeah. In 1, 2, change it back. Nope, not yet. In 1, 2, change it back now. Yeah, there we go. Now we've got our shaker sound back, which we could probably bring up in the mix a little now. But our clap stops. So the point of doing something like that is now over here on the Digitakt, let's say I've got 10 different patterns programmed. And, some of these sounds are attached to the sounds in miRack, like the chord stab, for example. And we can change these and change the patterns, but over here inside of miRack, we've got stuff that's going to happen without us having to actually do anything. So clap, but no shaker. In 1, 2, swap it back. And now we have the shaker, but no clap. And so if we wanted this to change slower and not every 8 bars, we would just change that clock back to something like divided by 4. And now we've got every 16 bars instead of every 4 bars is this trigger signal. Now just to explain that one more time, the clock is running this sequencer. So how the speed of the clock determines how fast we're going to get back around to that first trigger signal. And that first trigger there is what's triggering the flow module to turn those on and off. 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, still counting. 5, 6, and 7, and 8. Here comes the downbeat on 9, and 10, 11, 12. Shakers are still on. 13, 14, 15, and let's swap these right now. Now we have the clap, but no shaker. And that will happen for 16 bars. Regardless of what happens over here on the Digitakt. That's kind of something to keep in mind, Christoph, is that and this is true with every single music software or every single music hardware. The creation of the music, the putting things together is one thing. And being able to actually record all of those parts out individually is a whole nother thing entirely. And basically, we're able to create this stuff, but this is just a 2-track recording at this time. All of the audio pieces are all being summed together, and we're coming out of just left and right of the Digitakt. Now, this is true with any piece of hardware that you're using or any app, like if you're like, you can create as many tracks as you want, or you can get 20 pieces of hardware involved in your jam, but that's all going to be running into a mixer somehow, and then out of that mixer you're going to be getting two stereo channels, a left channel and a right channel. The way to go around that is to get a special mixer that has multi-track outputs over USB, so that everything that you've plugged into the individual channels of your mixer is coming out of a separate individual out over that one USB cable to a computer that's recording all of those in a multi-track environment like a DAW. Or if you have, some of the mixers will have like a built-in card that you can record your multi-tracks directly onto that card. In fact, I use the 1010 Blue Box mixer over here with the Eurorack, and that's exactly how that mixer works here. This little guy over here records, it's got like 12 mono tracks or 6 stereo tracks or any combination of those, and I can record the audio that I've got plugged in and routed there, and it will record to up to those 12 individual tracks. The thing is that when you now go to load those tracks up into your computer DAW, like on your desktop or something like Ableton or whatever, and you want to align those 12 individual tracks that you've recorded, they work together, but if you want to get those tracks onto like the grid into Ableton, where it syncs to Ableton's tempo, and you can add more tempo synced effects or add more sounds, that process gets really, really difficult, because these standalone boxes and these standalone mixers that record to like an SD card, they don't snap to like a virtual grid, for instance. There's no grid. It's just audio. And what you're left with is multi-tracks that will play back, together, but they're not in Ableton. They're not aligned to a grid. And if you try to, arbitrarily get 12, 10, 20 minute, 8-minute, whatever long your track is, if you try to get all those tracks, to align to the grid inside of Ableton, that's like a challenge that basically will send you running, is kind of what I'm getting at. And so the challenge of creating and then the challenge of recording really need to be thought of as two different things. And that's just sort of how I approach it. All right. What about AUV audio multi-out? Yeah, inside of we're not inside of here, though. We're inside of miRack. And so all of these outputs are all summed together into one output. If you had, 16 different instances of miRack, one on each channel in you'd probably blow up your iPad, but you could get individual channels done that way. The other way to do it is, just record the pieces out individually. This is often why you see me working in a sample-based workflow, and why I'm not in here trying to record, multi-tracks into a DAW specifically, because the more I try to do that, the more anomalies and difficulties came up along the way. And I really find that just conceptually dividing up these things entirely makes it a whole lot easier. So if I wanted, to get these parts, and actually put this into a track together, I wouldn't try to just set it up somehow to where we could record all the tracks individually together. I would actually go through and record just a little bit of the bass line and get that into a DAW. Then I would record just a couple of bars of the other sounds and get those into the DAW, and approach it that way. Like I would approach that session entirely different than a writing session, and I wouldn't personally try to get the creation of the music. I wouldn't think about the multi-track recording of it when I'm creating the music. They're really two different things entirely for me personally. And I have a lot less struggle that way. Everyone I know who's trying to get like everything multi-tracked and perfectly like that, the only way you would be able to do it would be into something like Ableton and hopefully get those recordings to line up to the grid. And milliseconds matter and latency and all those things, and like it's a challenge. It is a huge challenge. And I really recommend to try to keep those conceptually different. If you can get around the concept of like, this is my bass line, it's 4 bars long, I don't need to record it for 10 minutes of a song. Like when you're trying to take something you've created and get that into like a song format, if you can just take those individual pieces and then do the arranging inside of the DAW itself, you're going to be a lot better off. Cool, but we did get our bass line back, which is what we were trying to do there. All right. So here's what we've got. We've got our bass line, we've got shakers, we've got a ride, we've got a few things automagically turning on and off, which is always good. Now, if we were in and we had each of these, like if we had different instruments, not miRack per se, but on each channel, you could always record those channels in individually. But again, that's what I mean by thinking about it. You would have to, from the very beginning, you would have to create an session with the intention of being able to record all those tracks out individually. And even when you did, it would be the same as if you recorded into any other standalone recorder. Those tracks like don't necessarily like line up with a grid per se right off the jump. So there's always that challenge, to get the stuff that you've written into a finished state. If you're doing all the sequencing and all the arranging inside of the boxes, a lot of times there's not really a specific reason to need to multi-track everything out. Just get it mixed and sounding the best that you can and record everything out into 2 tracks. I mean, that's how I do 90% of the music on this channel. I'm not multi-tracking anything or reproducing the stuff that I've made in this hardware. Pretty much what you're getting is a left and a right, mix of whatever audio I'm routing into my master mixer in here for all the stuff. If I'm really trying to take the time and put together like an EP of like finished music, then I will definitely, multi-track stuff out and get it into Ableton and polish everything to the best that I can. But that adds so much time, and if I did that with like every single project in here, I would only be able to do like less than half the amount of projects based on that extra, production time in Ableton. Definitely something to be said for just getting everything mixed and as even as you can, and then just recording that 2-track master out. That can definitely get you there. All right, let's see about adding at least one more thing before we call this session today. So the last thing we did was the Automagic stuff inside of miRack. So we have these things turning on and off. Let's see. What if we... to let Opie out there real quick. Maybe we could just find one quick thing on the virus to just put in here, maybe. Kind of like that. Find the MIDI menu all of a sudden. Come on. Well, that's fine. Alright. Anomaly day. Anomaly day on the stream. Alright. I've got to just give it up. It's hard to give it up sometimes. Alright. Yeah, okay, let's do this then. Let's just try to add like another kind of arpeggio type sound before we call it today. And I think we could probably create something like this. I'm kind of trying to sample something like that out of the virus per se. So let's see if we can't just create that inside of miRack. Some things, take longer than others, and I don't know how long these streams are going to go, so I don't want to be too tedious. But let's all right, let's just grab tags. Let's start this here. We're going to grab a sequencer, and let's just make this, for now, let's just grab the one that I like to use a lot, which is the 3x16 here. Let's bring this down to the bottom, and let's give this our clock and reset signal. We're going to give this our main clock signal, and we're going to give this our main reset signal so that it knows when the downbeat is, and it knows that we're talking about 16th notes. Fantastic. Let's pick a module that we can actually use to make the arpeggio with. Let's go, let's see, let's just choose another Platts module from Mutable Instruments here, because it's really easy to work with. We can bring this over a little bit. We're going to need another attenuverter. I like the one from Befaco, so we can go to Packs, Befaco, and grab this dual attenuverter here. And then we can grab, let's grab that stack module. In case we want to move the octave up around on this, we can go to Packs, and that's in the Bog Audio, and it's called Stacked, which I believe is around here somewhere. Come on. There it is, stack. Okay, cool. And we can put this here and bring this here. So we've got out to the right. Okay, so volt per octave to in and out to the volt per octave, and then out to the, okay, cool. And let's see here, we're gonna need an envelope on this sound as well. Let's just do that super quick and easy. If we go on tags and we go to envelope generator, we can grab that attack and decay envelope generator from Bog Audio again. Double tap here and we can grab that VCA. So amplifier and VCA, and it's just this VCA from Bog Audio. Okay, fantastic. So we've got a sequencer, we've got an attenuverter, we've got the stack module, so we can control the octave of our pitch if we want to, super easily. And then we've got a really easy to use envelope generator here, which will accept a trigger signal. I'll plug that into our sequencer. When it hits the trigger, when it receives the trigger signal rather, it will create this envelope shape that we can sculpt here via the attack and decay controls. We can take the envelope output, we can route that into the CV, the control voltage input on our amplifier. So the shape of our envelope opens up this amplifier and lets the sound through. I hope that made sense. And we're going to grab the output of our VCA, and we're going to route that into the melodic side of the mixer. And I think we'll also need that limiter in case this is low in the volume. So we're going to go Bog Audio, and we're going to go limiter, and then rather than routing this directly out, I'm going to route that into the limiter first. Okay, cool. And let's see here. We just need the trigger to trigger that envelope, so we're going to trigger that there as well. Cool. And so basically, I'm going to make this a 16-step sequence, I think, to start with. Yeah, right on. And I can randomize this, a little randomize button on each sequencer lane here. That bass is coming through a little loud, though. Whoops. Yeah. That bass down in the mix a little, yeah. Just a little bit so I don't have to yell over it, and then we just figure this out. Okay, we just need to take the output of our oscillator here, and we need to route that into the VCA. Now we're only hearing just the one note because the attenuverter is keeping that, huge amount of pitch information. It's keeping it at 0. We can now adjust just how much pitch information we want to let through using the upper dial. And the offset button is going to basically, we're using this as pitch now. So the offset is basically going to change where in that octaves that this is going to start. I hope that makes any sense. But we start moving this up to get, the range of notes coming through. We're going to need a quantizer as well so that we can snap to the scale that we're in. We can do that easily by just double-clicking the quantizer we've already got and going duplicate. We can just easily move these over a little bit. Cool. And then put that quantizer right before these. This is going to keep our notes in the same key that we're already working with, which is in the key of F minor currently. The F, this is set, to keep our notes in that scale. Yeah, now those notes that are coming out are more in key with our chord that we're hearing there. Let's just randomize that pattern again. Maybe make this an 8-bar pattern? An 8-step pattern? How about a 9-step pattern? And then it will start to do some sort of polyrhythmic stuff over the groove, maybe. Just gonna randomize that a few times. That's kind of cool. We can mess with, the envelope shape, make it a tighter sound, right? Or a longer sound. And then we can kind of shape the sound itself using the actual oscillator here. We can choose different model if we want. Change the shape, the timbre of those sounds, modulation happening on that sound, so it's a little bit boring by default. But what we can do is bring our other melodic sounds off of mute and bring them back into the mix, and then try to mix this sound a little bit with the existing melodics we've got going. Yeah, let's get some modulation happening on this. What we can do is we can use, these outputs from the LFO that we've already got going. We can just grab some of those and we can modulate some of these points here, like the timbre. We could just take an output from that. We could make this knob move maybe just a little bit to the left according to the tempo of that LFO. We could sort of do the same thing with the morph as well. We could take that out of a different output and we could have that knob move a little bit as well. A little better already. Something maybe we could do that might really help take this to another, level would be to add another Plats module here next to this one and run them together. Let's try that. If we double click on the module and go manage, we can just straight duplicate that, and we can move some of these things over out of the way and put these modules right next to each other. And let's see here. What I'd like to do is I'd like to run them both into the same envelope. So I'm not sure if we can do that without a multiple. Let's try. No, we're going to need a multiple for that, and that's not a problem. A multiple just lets us run, more than one thing through one thing, and we're going to go to packs, we're going to go to audible instruments, and here we can just grab the multiple here. This allows us to plug, more than one thing into the same thing. And if we just scoot these down a tiny little bit here, I want to move, this all the way, yeah, right here. Okay, fantastic. Now I can take the output of, let's see, I can go on the bottom here, I can put 3 inputs together and get those out of one output. So I'm just going to take both of our oscillators and I'm going to route them both into this multiple here, so that taking this output is combining both of those sounds into one sound now. Okay. And let's put this one back to its default state and maybe change the model to a different sound model. We're going to need to trigger this the same way that we triggered the other one. So that one will allow me to run the same, and I believe this one will as well. So now I'm taking the volt per octave information, that's the pitch information, out of our sequencer, and I'm running that into 2 oscillators. We're taking the rhythmic trigger information, and we're triggering both oscillators with that as well, and everything is running through the same input together. Let's hear what this is starting to sound like now. Oh, I see. I need to run the pitch information through the attenuverter so that it will match. It's currently not matching and it's sounding very odd. So we have the output here for the pitch actually running through our attenuverter, and I can grab that and bring that in. Fantastic. And get that trigger back where it goes, and I think that was the only adjustment we'll need to make to get those playing in the same notes as each other. Absolutely. If we can't change the timbre of the sound to make it interesting. Doesn't quite seem to be gelling the way that I was hoping that it would, unfortunately. It's kind of a bummer. Okay, what let's do maybe then is try to get one of those stacked modules to help us out here. I'm not really sure why that's not gelling more, and I think actually rather than waste more time, we're just going to pass on having that second one in there. It really, I think, should have gelled together pitch-wise a little bit more than it was. I'm not really sure about that. I see, it's our morph knob that's getting us that little tweaky bit there. That's what it is. Alright, well, let's at least get a little bit of extra reverb on this with the plateau module. If we go ahead and just double click on that, we can manage it and duplicate. Then we can just bring this down over here. Whoops. We can just bring this down. Come on now. We can just bring this down over here. And we can route this now through the reverb so we get a little bit more texture on this sound. Yeah, cool. We can bring that dry wet down quite a bit so it's not so intense, you know. Maybe the length of this we could adjust as well, the decay. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna have that timbre move a little bit further with the knob there. Cool. There we go, a little bit more movement happening here as we get that sort of filter effect on the sound. Cool. See if we can't get our bass line back into the mix and whatnot here. There we go. A little more reverb on that lead. Let's put an EQ on this lead as well. Take off a little bit of the low frequency content on that arpeggio there. We could add a little bit of delay to that extra synth line as well by just moving the reverb over and double clicking. We can go tags and we can go delay. I like this dual delay. It's really easy to use, and we can set up like a clock input to it and adjust that to our main clock here, clock input. But actually clock input to the main input there, and that will give us the ability to sync the time to the clock here. I think that maybe half dotted might be good, and we can bring that level up and start checking that out. That trailing out there so I can see how long the reverb trail is, or the delay tail. I think that sounds pretty cool. Alright, let's if I can't get this mixed a little bit better. Got that clap. Bring up the volume on that clap a little bit. And the pitch I'm bringing up on that clap as well. I'm going to take a look also at the visualizers inside of Ableton at this time. Looks like we're pushing a little bit too much high frequency content. Remove a little tiny bit of the high frequency content from those shakers by adding an EQ. If we actually, we could probably do that really simply by adding a filter. So if we just go to the filter section and grab this VCF from Bog Audio, it's probably really easy to do. Yeah, we can just move these over and bring this VCF in before it goes into the flow. Fantastic. Now what we can do is we can take this clap sound and route that into this really gentle filter here. I can put this down to a 1 decibel. I'm not really sure what this is exactly, how I say this, but it turns it into a one pole filter, so 6 decibels per octave filter. Give a tiny little bit of resonance there and bring this back up to the top, and then we'll take off the highs as needed. I'm already back in line over here on the visualizer actually, so that's going to be enough. All right. So we've got a chord stab happening in the Digitakt here. Let's see if I can get my screen looking correct again. Sorry about that. And what we could do would be to maybe pan that stab like 10 to the left. And then we've got some melodics that are happening on this side. And maybe what we could do would be to like pan those a little bit to the right to give just a little bit of stereo separation in our mix here. What let's do at this time, I think, is make a little bit more room in the mix for that third arpeggio line by using another flow module to turn that sound on and off every, 8 or 16 bars. We can just double click here and we can go back to the tags. Excuse me, I keep saying to try to combine these words. We could go to the packs section and grab the flow module from MI. And then we can just literally route this from the reverb into the flow module and out from the flow module into the mixer. We don't need a reset signal to the flow module, apparently, and we just need to send it a trigger signal so that it knows when to turn the track on and off. And if I use our existing trigger signal here, which is set up to trigger every 16 bars that we're currently using to alternate between the shakers and the clap sound, that this sound will now just sort of sync in with that, and every 16 bars we will turn automatically this arpeggio on or off. So here it's off. Give a little bit more legs in the mix, for the sounds to have their own spaces. So here's 9. Nothing's changed yet, right? We're still grooving along with the shakers. But in 4 bars, we're going to turn off the shakers, turn on the clap, and turn on our arpeggio. Here we go. So the arpeggio comes in with the clap now. Maybe bring that a little louder. A little more delay even. Alright, now that arpeggio is going to turn off. In 1, 2, 1, 2, turn it off. And we're back to sort of that other, you know, this is the benefit of doing the sequencing inside of miRack in addition to sequencing inside of the Digitakt, so that we've got stuff, we've got stuff that's sort of happening without us having to do anything. And then if we want things to happen, you know, where we tell it what to do, we can just create different patterns over here. So I can go pattern 1, copy, and go pattern 2, and paste pattern 1 into pattern 2, right? Now, if I select pattern 2, I could do something like turn off that chord stab, right? Our main chord stab inside of this box. And if we save here, and if we save over here on this side, now we've got everything, you know, backed up and whatnot. But what we can do is I can like start with pattern 2, for instance, and pattern 2, 5. Why is that still? There we go. I just had one extra note in there for no reason, and now it's gone. So when we're on pattern 2 and we start, we've just got, it's still coming through? Which one is that? Let's figure this out. Yeah, so it's in the miRack. Okay, so which one is it then? There's still a chord stab happening that I'd like to be able to, you know, maybe turn on and off in miRack as well. So I believe then it's going to be, no, that's our arpeggio, and that's, is it this one here is our chord stab? Yes. Okay, so let's do that. We've got an extra input of our flow here. What we can do is we can alternate these. Maybe put one on red and one on blue, and then we can take this input and then route this to our mixer. Back where it was. Fantastic. And now we just need that on and off trigger signal here for this. So we'll just go external and route that in. Is that going to let me? Fantastic. So now we've got this turning on and off every, turning off our second chord inside of miRack every 16 bars as well. So when I finally when I start on pattern 2, there should be no chord samples happening and more of just a basic techno groove. Alright, let's see if I need to turn this off like so, maybe. Yeah, cool. So now, alright, and if I put those rather here, then when I start it, there'll be no chord, and then in 16. So you can change these, you know, what state they're in, depending on where you need it to be at that time. We want it to not play when I hit start. So if I start when they're on blue, they'll turn red when I hit start, and that will mute it for 16 bars. I hope that makes sense. But that gives us like 16 bars to start with of, you know, just that sort of more techno-y groove. And then after 16 bars, it's going to switch all 4 of these, you know, flows into the, to let the other information through. Yeah, so here we are with just that really heavy techno groove of the hi-hats, the kick, and the bass. Hey, thanks, Sky Tortoise Fairy Man. I'm trying to keep going. 2, 2, 3, and 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, and 5. because I did that separate output. Let's find out. 2. Gonna let it play through one more time and just make sure that those changed or not. That seems odd. 3 and 2. 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2. Expect to change now. There we go. I'm not sure why it didn't trigger that first time through. But now we've turned our ARP on. Which one is that? This one here? Yeah. Let's make it alternate back and forth. So it's either the ARP or the chord playing here. So currently we're getting the chord, right? Now let's change it up. We turn the chord off. We turn those shakers on. We turn that clap off, and I could change patterns here. 1, 2, and 1, 2. Change that pattern. And we get the chord stab from this side now. And 9, 2, 3, 4, 10, 2, 3, 4, 11, and 12, and 13, 14, and 15, and 16. Lots of changes. We have quite a few options to choose from here inside of miRack. I'm not exactly sure how each of these, visualizers works, but they're a little bit different. This one is kind of a neat one here. It's kind of a neat little visualizer here. Let's see if I can remember how to route this. If I'm not mistaken, it's not going to let me out of the default. Will it let me out of these? No, it doesn't want to let me combine it. Okay, so let's do a multiple and get that going in the mix, shall we? If we go tags and we go multiple, I can just grab this multiple here. So what we can do is, whoops, put this here and put this here. Fantastic. And I can take these away. Okay, left into, let's see, left into, no, that's not what I want. I need 2 of those multiples then. So manage and duplicate. Fantastic. So left into in and right into in. And then I can take out, whoops, and out, left, right. Okay, I can take it out and bring that into the main out. But I could also take a main out now and I can put this into a visualizer. And let's see what happens. That volume up. I'm not super versed with how to use this visualizer, but it looks kind of interesting. I'm not sure how to get this where on the screen we want it. It's all up on the, anyways. There is several different visualizers in here that you can use to visualize your stuff, depending on how you want to do that. If you just go to tags and visualizers, you've got, several different ones. That one wasn't really providing what I was expecting. I think maybe the full scope might be a little bit more what I was expecting. Manage and delete, manage and delete. If we bring this up here, can I do that? Can I bring these in maybe and get that going? Let's see. Yeah, so we've got a little bit of a scope here. I'm sure it's probably adjustable a little bit, right? I'm not exactly sure what the adjustments will do. Just trying to make it smaller if possible. Yeah, a little bit. And have it spin around or do weird stuff. I'm not really sure exactly how helpful that is, but it's kind of neat. Choose a different mode, have it do something else for the visualization. But if you wanted to, you could certainly run different visualizers into different instruments here, so that like the arpeggio was going through a certain visualizer, and your chord stab was going through a different visualizer. That just sort of depends on what you might need the visualizers to do, or if you just want it to look cool, But yeah, I think we pretty much got there today, finally, in the end. We were able to get miRack completely synced up with the Digitakt here, and we've been using it for a couple of hours without anomalies. We did have quite a bit of anomalies along the way. I think the biggest one was just the sort of not really having a lot of success using the powered USB hub between the Digitakt and miRack. That seemed to really get things screwy, and we had to cancel the stream in the very beginning because it wasn't functioning as expected. But without that, between them, it seems to be working just fine. And again, we're able to use the MIDI channels on the bottom row of the Digitakt here to route into any of these channels here that we want on the MIDI trigger input module inside of miRack. Probably hard to see right now because that's always a challenge with these streams. When I have the lighting set well for the main view, it often looks, really awful on this view, or strange on this view. So bear with me with the weird lightings, as these streams continue. But let's see here. So we've got our Automagic stuff happening inside of miRack with the flow, and we are totally in sync. I just want to hang for a few more minutes so you guys can say goodbye to each other, and if anybody has any questions, whether they be Eurorack related or, any other kind of music production related, definitely do my best to answer those before we totally call it today. Cool, right on. Let's just listen to this for a little bit longer. That bass line is probably a little bit heavy for dub techno sound, But, when we're writing in real time, I kind of never know exactly what's going to happen on these streams, Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Christophs. I appreciate that, you guys. Thanks, Sky Tortoise Ferryman. I just want to say thanks again, Brett, for sending your art. I really dig it, and that was really awesome of you to send. I really appreciate that. That's really awesome. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. All right. So yeah, I guess we are going to go ahead and call it, you guys. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hanging out. I'm sorry we had to do a little bit of a restart today, as that hiccup in the beginning went a little bit sideways. But I'm glad that we did persevere, because I really wanted to show that you can connect these two devices up. Although at the end of the day, it seems a little weird that we weren't able to use the MIDI controller in, the routing here. It seems like that should have worked just fine, and it definitely is kind of a letdown to have such an awesome configuration, but then not have the MIDI controller able to, to control this. There may be a different way to do the routing. And if there is, hopefully I'll figure that out so that we could still do this kind of a setup with the MIDI controller for miRack, because that would certainly be, a lot more powerful here if we had all those knobs and buttons that we could assign to things to jam with in real time. But yeah, we are going to call it, and fantastic, you guys. Thanks a lot for hanging out. So until next time, thanks for watching. All right. Yeah. Bye-bye, everybody.